Hello, welcome to another session of the Houdini Training. My name is Gianvito Serra, and today we're going to be learning on how to set up a digital asset to export to a game engine, like such as Unreal or Unity or whatnot, right? What we're going to be covering here is a little bit of like some of the things that goes into taking an asset which you built, which is simply a geometry generator, right? Such as a column generator, which is what I'm going to use, and set it up in such a way so that it can start becoming part of like a much bigger pipeline, okay? Like something that will generate an asset for the game, something that will eventually, be able to, for example, have materials associated with it, or even like, deal with image compositing and things of the sort, right? So at the very beginning of these sessions, I mentioned that you want to really, Houdini is divided in many different contexts, okay? And today we're going to touch into how to build an asset that can work in multiple contexts effectively, okay? And there is many ways to go about doing that. What I'm about to show you is just taking an asset, which is just a geometry generator, and making it a full, almost like a mini scene digital asset, right? Something that is almost like a portable little scene generator that travels with you, and that way you can use to actually generate models which can export into your game engine, okay? Okay. So that's it, let's go ahead and get started. To get started with this, I'm going to go back and actually use the column generator that we used on the very first tutorials, okay? So we're going to go ahead and actually drop a geometry node, okay? And inside of it, I'm going to delete the file node, because we don't need it. We're just going to go ahead and press tab and go and drop our column generator tutorial digital asset, okay? And as you guys remember this from the first session that we had, is just a digital asset that generates a column where we can adjust the height, we can adjust the radius, we can adjust the taper of a column, we can adjust the rows and columns that we have on this actual asset, okay? We can control the number of grooves, and so on and so forth, okay? Cool. So, as is, there is many ways that we can actually get this asset exported, okay? Okay, one very easy way to doing so is to simply right-click on your model and go Save and Geometry, okay? If you're using Houdini 14, this may just say Save Geometry right here on the menu. In Houdini 15 now, some of these things have been put into subgroups for your convenience, okay? I'm going to say Save Geometry. I'm going to go browse to, say, for example, my desktop. And I'm just going to save it under test.obj on my desktop, okay? And hit accept. Alright, so if we go back to my desktop, you'll notice that I have now, and let me just sort by view details, there we go. You will notice that I have now a obj file, which is my column that I exported, okay? So it's very simple. However, it's not a very good pipeline way of doing things, okay? First and foremost, most of the time when you're trying to export to an engine, it's not, sometimes yes, you can export an obj if you just want to get a quick model in, but most of the time you want to export a more complex format which allows you to store LODs, collision meshes, and things of the sort, right? So we're thinking more like, for example, FBX files are more appropriate for doing such an export, okay? Now, one important difference in between FBX files, Alembic files, and OBJ files is that FBX, Alembic, those kind of files are what is called scene containers, okay? They're actually scene files. An FBX and an Alembic file contain a full scene definition with a full DAG path. Some cases a bit of a dependency graph, not in the case of Alembic, which does geometry cache, but definitely a lot more than just geometry, okay? So for this example, in Unreal, I'm just going to use FBX files, which is what Unreal supports, and just show you how to set that up. Now, OBJ files are just geometry files, so therefore, yes, you can go to any kind of geometry inside of Houdini. You can even dive inside of a digital asset, right-click on any node that you want, and just save the node as geometry. And you just get a OBJ file or a BGO file, which is an internal format of Houdini. There's many formats that Houdini supports, but you will get a file that basically just represents your geometry at that stage for that node. This is basically the geometry that was cached at that node. And it's really useful more for debugging than it is for a full pipeline, okay? If we're going to do something more complex that has to export to an engine, we want to actually start setting up almost like a little scene inside of our HIP file, which is what we're going to be exporting to an FBX file, okay? Okay, so in order to do so, we're going to first grab our column generator tutorial, okay? And I'm gonna go to the top of it, and I'm going to say I'm gonna rename this geo file to call it column underscore geo, okay? So this is gonna say that this object that I have here is my column geometry, okay? Now, next to it, or actually the first thing I want to do is to grab this column geo operator, and I want to go ahead and actually put it in, actually no, I'm going to just leave it alone for now, okay? We're just going to leave it as just this geometry node, okay? First thing that I want to do is that I want to actually drop we're going to actually want to start exporting this as an FBX file, okay? So next thing we're going to do is that we're going to actually drop a ROP network, okay? An ROP network, a ROP network, which stands for Render Operator Network, it is a context inside of Houdini which allows you to set up exporting pipelines, okay? It's a means for you to create, to wire nodes inside of a little subnetwork which allows you to do pipelines which trigger outputs, okay? So for example, you can have something that renders all of these as whole sequence, and then pushes the whole sequence to a COP network which does a bunch of image editing, and then actually exports a COP network using a composite ROP afterwards, okay? And you can do all of these wirings in here. For the purposes of this training, we're just going to just look at how to use a ROPNet to simply just export FBX files. So it's going to be very simple what we're going to do here. So I'm going to call this ROPNet export, okay? And inside of it, I'm going to press tab, and you will notice that the menu looks different. Again, you learned this from learning about Houdini contexts. But inside of here, our tab or menus have, for example, operators which allows us to export geometry. It allows you to export image composites. It allows you to trigger renders using Mantra or even the OpenGL renderer, okay? But from this class, what we want is to be able to actually do a FilmBots FBX export, which is under scene. So we want to go ahead and do FBX. Okay, and drop an FilmBots FBX output node, okay? Cool. So now, this node right here is the node that is going to help us export our column, okay? And then if we look at the parameter window for this, we have a few options which are very typical of output operators, okay? So we have a save to disk or a render button here. We have a frame range if we wanted to actually export multiple frames. We can also look at where we want to output the file, and also what are we trying to export, okay? And we want to create intermediate directories, obviously. For FBX, a few things that are actually of interest are the format of FBX that we're going to be using for exporting. Also if we're using this as a vertex cache, whether it's going to be Maya compatible or not. We really don't care about that right now, so we're just going to leave it to Maya. And how to deal with invisible objects, okay? Most of this stuff is just different details, but then all of the operators too that are actually output operators also allow you to put a pre-render scripts, pre-frame scripts, post-frame script, and post-render scripts. And this is just Python scripts that you can, or commands that you can tie to what to do after you export something, okay? So say, for example, you want to export something and write a log, you can do a lot of these things in here, okay? We don't care about those things right now, so we're going to turn them off, okay? So what we want to do is to export that object in my column geometry into a file. So I'm going to call that file column.fbx. And right now I don't actually have a heap file or a heap file that I'm actually using here. So I'm actually going to go ahead and browse to a location to save this, okay? For the purposes of my class, I'm just going to go to my videos folder, and under Houdini and under scenes, I'm going to go ahead and actually save it here as column.fbx. Okay, there we go. Cool. So now that we have done this, we should be able to actually simply just press the save to this button to export our FBX file. Okay, so it's just as simple as pressing this button, and now we have an FBX file. Okay, if we go to this location, and let me just copy this, we browse to it, you will notice that now we have an FBX file, which is our column.fbx. Okay, now I like to show you what that actually looks like if we import it inside of Houdini. Okay, so we go to File and we do Import FBX file. So it's going to import the whole FBX scene. I'm going to go ahead and actually browse where the column FBX is. We're just going to import the geometry. We don't care really about anything else. Okay. Most of the default settings will actually work okay for what we're doing here. Okay, we're just going to hit merge, which is going to merge that FBX scene inside of Houdini. Now, when you do that, what Houdini does is that it actually creates a subnet which contains all the contents of that FBX scene. Again, remember, an FBX file is not a geometry generator, is a scene generator. So we actually are generating a full scene, okay, which we can look at in here. And we'll see that we have a geometry node, which is a column node. But notice that our column geo is actually just a node which is actually locked down and is actually cached to just contain the geometry of the FBX file. Okay, there is ways that we can do this so that it's not caching, but it's procedurally importing the geometry from the FBX file. But this tutorial, is not focused on the FBX pipeline of Houdini, but it's mostly focused on how to export assets using FBX to push inside of Unreal. Okay, but that's just to show you that we're actually storing basically the little scene that we're generating inside of an FBX file. Okay, so the scene contains this geo mesh, and that's what is actually going in the FBX file. Okay, I delete that off here. And we're going to show this again. But what I like to do now that we exported this is to go ahead and actually import it inside of Unreal. Okay. So now that we have an FBX file, we go ahead and actually launch Unreal. Okay. So now, what I like to do here is to actually import my column. So, as you saw in some of the other tutorials, to import an actual asset in an FBX file inside of Unreal, all that we have to do is to go to the content browser and go to import, and then browse to where our FBX file is. Okay, in this case I want to go to my videos, Houdini, scenes, and actually load our FBX file. Okay, and so for now, for the purposes of this, we're gonna go ahead and actually go with just the default settings. Okay, just so that you can see what happens. I'm gonna go ahead and hit import. We're gonna get a few warnings here, but that's okay. We're not gonna worry about this right now. But now we have an actual column generator in here, okay? So let's go ahead and actually drop this in. And you will notice that we now have a column in, okay? Something is just not right with it. If you see, if we look at it a little bit more carefully, and if you look carefully, you will see that all of our mesh really looks like it's actually kind of like broken you know, there is holes around it. And there is actually what looks like concave geometry on the top, but not so much on the bottom. The bottom is doing a little bit more of what I want, okay? So, now the reason why this is happening is because we've been working on this particular asset inside of Houdini for a while. And what we're seeing here is for the first time, we're looking into some of these things that may be visible inside of the engine, which are not visible inside of Houdini, okay? And in this particular case is the backface culling, okay? Now, in Houdini though, we can indeed show backface culling, that's not a problem, okay? All that we have to do is to press D to inside of the viewport to bring the display options, and if we go to the last tab, which is optimize, we can turn on remove backfaces. Okay, and now look at that. Now we can see the exact same problem that we see inside of Unreal, inside of Houdini. Okay, Unreal favors being able to show backfaces all the time, you know, because or to close backfaces all the time, because it is really something that is important on the engine. Okay, when you're working in an engine, you explicitly want to choose whether you want something to be two-side rendering or not. For Houdini, this is not as important. Therefore, by default, you see two-sided rendering on everything, okay? It's one of the things that you're going to learn working inside of an engine is that you will run into these places where you're going to want to have to be able to, where you're going to have to want to be able to have the ability to edit. The editing environment of your digital content creation app may not be as, you know, biased towards certain things as your engine is, okay? So when we see problems inside of Unreal, you will always want to be able to try to figure out, well, what is Unreal doing different than your DCC app? In this particular case, in Houdini, it's just the backface culling, okay? So to fix this in this particular example, that's very easy. Okay, all that we have to do is to dive inside of our node here, or column geo, and go inside of our digital assets. If you remember from last few classes, we right click on it and say allow editing of contents. Okay, and we'll go inside. We notice that what looks like it's flipped is the actual grooves of the column as well as the top cap. If you look down, you will notice that the bottom cap is actually fine. Okay, so we just need to resolve this for just a few items. Okay, so in our column generator, our grooves get added to the actual to the final thing in the carve groove into slice node. Okay, so we dive inside of it. If you recall correctly, this is where we actually merge our groove with our actual final asset. Okay, what we want to do here is that grab this asset right here and actually flip it so that we're actually seeing the correct side of it. See that? So let me get a little closer. You can see that we have the front face, which looks great, and then the back face, which looks broken. Okay, the solution is super simple. All that we have to do is in between, before we actually merge the groove into the main asset, simply put a reverse node. Okay, the reverse node will simply flip your faces so that they're actually facing the correct direction, or in this particular case, the direction that intentionally we wanted us to be the correct direction. Okay, very cool. The next thing we have to fix, and you will see that now this looks correctly, is the actual top, which is actually using the back faces as well. So if we go back to the top cap that we have right here, and we frame it again, spacebar G, you notice that, sure enough, we can see the same problem in here. Okay, so all that we have to do, like we saw before, is just press here and then add a reverse node, and now everything looks as expected. Okay, we can even go back out by pressing U, and now we can see the whole column looking perfect, even in a situation where our back faces are turned off. Okay, very cool. So now we can go ahead and actually save our digital asset if you want, I am not going to worry about that right now for now, but I'm going to go ahead and actually just come to the export node and actually hit save to disk. Okay. So now after I save that change to my disk, I can come back to Unreal and I can simply right click on my node and say re-import. And now lo and behold, our column looks as expected. Very cool. Awesome. So at this point, we really can export as many variations of our column as we want to actually import inside of here, okay? But one thing that we can do, coming here, is that we can actually even start setting up almost like a mini scene, which contains and it's almost like an exporter node for our column, okay? And that's a good idea because eventually you may want to add, for example, collision geometries that are custom. So actually creating a little separation in between your actual column geometry and your actual node that you're going to export is a very good idea, okay? And I'll show you a little example of that, okay? So if we go here, I'm gonna go ahead and press tab and add a subnet node. And I'm gonna call this my column export, okay? And inside of that, I'm going to drop a geometry node, which is going to be my column, and I'm going to call it geo for my render mesh. And then I'm going to put in, instead of a file node, I'm going to add what is called an object merge node, okay? Now, what the object merge allows you to do is to take a node from a completely different network and import it into this network, okay? So this is gonna be my object merge column, and I'm going to browse to where my actual column is. So in this particular case, I'm going to pick up my column geo. I'm gonna set up my path to be relative, make sure that you have that on. And now you will notice that my geo is imported here, okay? But, so cool. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my ROP export node, okay? And I'm going to change my export path from being obj column, okay, to being my column export subnet, okay? Very cool. One last thing that I'm going to do though is that I want also this to be a relative path, okay? Unfortunately, you'll notice that this doesn't give you the option to pick a relative path, okay? And this is just because of a limitation that we have with the render context, where we cannot use relative paths in the same way that we use in the object context or the actual and in the actual surface context. However, that said, there is a way to get around that, okay? So all that we have to really do is to actually create a relative path to the location of our subnet. In this case, you just want to go up 2 levels, and then want to pick the column export subnet, okay, which creates that. Whoops, I don't need 2 of them. There we go. You just add it to the end of the actual line, which is why I got 2. And then all that you have to do here is to add a up full path expression, okay? Then make sure that you put your path in parentheses and then in quotes, okay? And also make sure that your whole expression, because this is a string expression, is on tildes, okay? So remember, tildes at the end. Tildes you can make by actually pressing the key next to the 1 on an English keyboard, and also quotes and parentheses, okay? So just to actually make that super clear, I'm going to show you the expression here. Oops. Make this a little bigger. Then I'm going to zoom in very closely. Okay, you will see the expression is op full path, open parentheses, quote, the relative path to your actual object, close quotes, close parentheses, and then put everything on tildes, okay? And what I will do is when you middle mouse on the label export, you will notice that I get the full path of this, but from a relative path to that. Okay, this is going to be very useful because eventually we want to encapsulate this into another digital asset, which will be portable. Okay. All right, cool. So now that we have all of this ready, let's try to export our column. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and actually save to disk. Okay, and I'm going to go back to Unreal. And you really shouldn't see that much of a change with this particular change I'm about to do because it's a little window. So we're going to just right click on this and then just do reimport, and you will notice that nothing really changed. Okay, that's cool. But the reason why is just because all that I did was I just wanted to reorganize my scene so that the FBX was actually picking not my geometry that was generating, but at something that references that geometry, so that I can have a different subnet altogether which can handle just exporting objects, right? If one day I wanted to create a collision mesh out of that, I can do so very easily, you know, but it's because I have a subnet, and we'll show a little bit of that in another tutorial. Okay? But what I like to do, just to even accentuate that even more, is to show you a use case for this particular setup, okay? Now you will notice if we go to my column geo that the mesh is simply not triangulated, okay? Which generally an engine really wants triangulated meshes, okay? So what's happening is that Unreal is actually doing its own triangulation, which may or may not be what we want, okay? We may want to actually be able to control that triangulation from Houdini, okay? At the same time, I don't care about triangulating in Houdini because I like to see my mesh in quads. Okay, I really don't care about what the engine requires. I just want to see my mesh the way it is, okay? Because we have a separate subnet altogether which handles this, the exporting, okay? We can now go in here and on the object merge column node, and I'm going to go ahead and hide my other objects so that we're not getting confused here. I'm going to go ahead and actually drop a triangulate, a divide node. Okay, so there's my divide node. And now I'm going to turn on don't generate sliver and avoid small angles to get like a really nice triangulation. Okay, so this is very close to what Delanoy triangulation will be, and is the kind of triangulation that I want for the engine. Okay, but what's cool about it is that even though I have this mesh triangulated here, and I really don't like to look at all the triangles, especially around my grooves, if we go back out and we go back to my column geo, you will notice that the column geo is still clean. The only time that actually happens, or that we see that, is inside of the export node. Okay, so that's really awesome, you know, because a really nice way to be able to not have to really worry about how, you know, some of the things that the engine needs, and just keep some of those things like tucked in a different area of my asset. Okay. And even go ahead and hide this so that I don't have to even look at it, and all I'm worried about is this particular one. Okay, so I'm gonna go back inside of here and I'm gonna go ahead and actually save to disk. Okay, so if we go back to Unreal and we go to reimport, everything is working still as expected, but now I have actually my triangulation which I brought in from Houdini. Okay, which is really cool. So if I look at go to the column and I look at my wireframe, let me go ahead and maximize this so we can see a little bit better. I should have the very same triangulation that I brought from Houdini, which is really good triangulation. Okay, and it's something that I have control of, which is great. So awesome, very cool. Okay, so now the last step is to actually make it so that, and I'm going to delete this little sticky, make it so that it's very easy for anyone to use your column generator and not have to worry about setting up a ROP net or creating an export subnet. Okay, that's a little bit too much work, I think. Okay, so the same way how we create a digital asset, which is a digital asset for the actual geometry generator. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and actually go to type properties here, and I'm going to save this just as a different one for the sake of this tutorial. I'm gonna say tutorial 2. Okay, I'm gonna say tutorial flip normals. Okay, you don't have to rename your digital asset. I just want to do it so that I can keep my other files. Okay, and I'm gonna hit accept. After you save your changes, so I say save operator, save no type, which saves my changes inside the flipped in normals. I can right click on it and say match current definition, which now locks it down. Okay, so that's good. Now I have a lockdown node. If I go back out, I can now simply select all my objects and go ahead and put them in a subnet. Okay, just like we did with subs, I'm gonna put this whole little net into a subnet. Okay, so if we go inside now, we see that we have all these objects. Okay, like in a little subnet. I'm gonna just for organizational sake grab these little guys, which we don't need right now. I'm gonna put them over here. Okay, then I'll go back up by pressing U, and I'm going to create a digital asset out of this. Okay, so I'm gonna say create digital asset. Now the last digital asset that we created was called column generator. I think I'm gonna call this column asset. Okay, just for now I'm gonna just call it column asset. One day I may actually decide to do something more complex with it, like for example make it just a temple generator which uses column assets. Okay, but for now we're just gonna go ahead and call this column, instead of column generator, I'm gonna call it column asset. Okay, and that's gonna save to my HDA file here, and I'm gonna hit accept. Okay, so this is a lot like what we did before, where we want to control our digital asset, but I'm gonna do a few things here. Okay, if we look at my node, it has a bunch of parameters which came from the fact that this is used to be a subnet node instead of a transform context. Okay, I'm gonna keep some of this because I like the fact that now I can actually move my column like an object inside of a scene. Okay, but what I'm going to do is I'm gonna get rid of this subnet folder because I really don't care about it right now. Okay, all I care about is just my ability to transform this object. Okay, I'm gonna come to the subnet and I'm going to click on this node right here, this parameter right here, which we see here. You remember this from the digital asset creation class, that when we go to the edit operator type properties, if you go to parameters, you will see, you know, your parameters that already exist with your asset. And when you create a digital asset that is an object type, you will always start with many parameters that are associated with object nodes. Okay, we can delete this, but we can hide them. So I'm gonna select my subnet subfolder and I'm gonna set it to invisible. Okay, now I also don't care about some of these other parameters, like I don't care about lookat, I don't care about lookup object, I care about path object or role or position parameterization. Some of these things I don't care about. I really just care about translate, rotate, scale, pivot, uniform scale. I'll keep the orders, I'll keep parenting and some of these things. Okay, so I'll hit apply, and just like any other digital asset that we create, you will notice that we now have a transform tab with just the stuff associated with transforming. Oh, I actually forgot to make these guys invisible. I apologize. So select these guys and then click on the invisible flag. Okay, and then hit apply. So this is much simpler right now than what we had before. Okay, cool. Now the next thing I want to do is that the same way how I used to control the look of my column by playing with these parameters, I want to go ahead and actually promote these parameters to the top. Okay, so that we can actually still control the look of our columns without having to dive inside of our digital asset here. Okay, so what we're going to do is that we're going to go ahead and create a new folder. Okay, you can just click on this and then drag and drop it wherever you want it. And I'm gonna call this one my column settings. Okay, and then inside of this I'm going to put in the height, the overall radius. So basically all the parameters that I use to control my column. The rows, my color, enable column caps, all the good stuff. One thing that you can do if you want to actually make this a lot faster is to simply delete this and then simply just drag your node into here. And that will just bring your whole interface for this node in here at once, okay? Which in some cases, this is probably a lot faster than doing what I was actually doing one by one, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and actually hit apply. And you will notice that all my parameters here turn green because they're now being controlled from the top. And if we go back to our top level here by clicking on an object, you will notice that now I have a column settings tab. Okay. My group controls tab actually got transformed into a regular tab, so I'm gonna fix that. I'm gonna switch from it being a tab to being a collapsible folder. Okay, and then I'm gonna hit apply. Now it's back to being a collapsible folder like I wanted. Okay. And I have the transform stuff over here as well, so that if I want to get to that, okay? So that's cool. Awesome. Okay, so one more. So now we have a column asset generator, okay? And it's an object type, but now it has also the ability to export assets into Unreal, okay? So one thing that we should add probably is an export button, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and actually dive inside of my asset and go inside of my ROP net, and actually it's promote some of these parameters associated with exporting this FBX file, okay? So one thing I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna drag the output file parameter to, let's see, I think I'm gonna put it at the very bottom, okay? So I'm gonna click on drag it into root, which will put it at the very bottom, okay? I'm gonna minimize column settings, and there is my output file, okay? And I'm gonna rename this from sub output to maybe just output FBX, okay, to keep it simple. And I'm gonna actually call this output FBX to make sure that people know this is to export an FBX file, okay? I want my default not to be what I have in there right now. To point to, you know, my local folder. Somebody else comes over and uses my digital asset and is pointing to the D drive and you don't have a D drive, that's really bad, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually change the default to be $hip column.fbx, assuming that somebody's gonna be using a hip file. We can just provide this as a good default, okay? Awesome. So we hit apply. You will notice that this turns green immediately. And if we go to the very top level, now we have an output FBX parameter right here, okay? That's cool, but we should probably still have a button that allows you to export the FBX from where we are, okay? So what we're going to do is we're gonna dive inside again, okay? I'm gonna dive inside of here, and I'm gonna click my FBX node. If you look at the very, very top, remember that save to this button that we were using to export? We can now go ahead and drag it and put it in here as well. Okay, we'll put it at the very bottom. Very cool. I'm gonna go back to parameters, and I'm gonna rename it to save FBX, okay? And I'm gonna rename the label to save FBX, okay? And also, what I'm going to do is I'm gonna click on the one above it, and I'm going to turn on horizontally join to nets parameter, okay, which is going to make it so that the button shows up next to the actual output parameter, okay? So if we hit apply, now you notice that this became bold because the button is being controlled from the top. Go all the way to the top. You will notice that now I have a save FBX button right here. Very cool. I'm gonna also, just for the sake of cleanliness, I'm gonna add a separator right here. Let me go ahead and pick one up, and we'll put it right here. Hit apply. Now we just have a nice little separator to actually really keep this down here, okay? So now if we go to transform, if we go to column settings, you will notice that the output FBX is always here, okay? And it makes it easy for us to export or FBX files, okay? One more thing I'm gonna do. I'm gonna just for this is something that I like to do, you know, but which I learned from some other people, but you don't have to do it. But it's something that I like to do for this kind of assets. Is to drag another separator here, and to actually use a label to give your asset a title, okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm gonna name my label the title, and I'm actually going to turn on the actual label itself. And what this actually does is that you're not gonna get a label on the left. These labels right here are gonna show up on the center, okay? And I'm gonna call this column asset generator, okay? And I'm gonna hit apply. And now look, we have a little title here, okay? Very cool. And for now, I think I'm pretty much done with this. So I'm gonna hit accept on this. And I'm gonna right click on my subnet and say save node type. And then I'm gonna do match current definition. Or if you were actually using Houdini 14, this would probably be save operator type instead of save node type, okay? But this is cool because now I can very simply press tab and go to column, and then I have my column asset digital asset, okay? And I can simply now instantiate as many of these guys as I want, and I can even come in here and move them around because this is only object context, right? And as you remember, I have my transformation parameters there, so I can create all sorts of different column types right next to each other, okay? It's very cool. I can even say that, you know what, let me go ahead and actually zero this transform out. What I want to do, I'm going to call this one tall column, and I'm going to call this one small column, okay? And I'm going to come to the FBX files, and I'm going to call this tall column.fbx. And I'm going to call this small column.fbx. Okay, so now we have two columns, and remember you can toggle their visibility right here if you want to. I'm going to make this one even have a lot less grooves by actually going to my column settings and actually reducing the number of grooves. So we'll do something like this, okay? And then we'll go ahead and actually export them as separate assets, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and export this one. And we'll go ahead and export also this one. Now because these are all getting saved to heap, and I don't have a heap file, they're gonna be saved to my user's location. Because I don't wanna do that, I'm gonna go ahead and actually browse to where I wanna save them, which is going to be on my videos folder. Videos, Houdini, whoops. And I'm gonna go to scenes, and I'm gonna go ahead and save this as style column. Okay. And I'm gonna copy this parameter, go over here and say paste copied values, and then I'm gonna save this as small column. Okay. Now one thing that is cool about Houdini is that you can select both nodes and just click on this, and I will save both FBXs at the same time. We go to our location here. You notice that we have both of them just got saved a second ago. Okay. If we go back to Unreal, I'm gonna go ahead and delete this asset. I'm gonna go ahead and import the new ones. Okay. So I'm gonna import my small column and my tall column, and I'm gonna say open, and I'm gonna say import all. You notice that we get an error here. Okay, and I'll explain what this is. This is something that you may run into when working with FBX files coming from Houdini into Unreal. And I wanted to show you what causes this problem. Okay. If we go back to Houdini, everything seems to be working great here. But if we go dive inside of our small column, you will notice that inside of a ROP net and our FilmBots node, there is a parameter called export invisible objects and how to actually handle invisible objects, which by default is set to as hidden null nodes. Okay. Go back out. When we created a little subnet for exporting, we went ahead and actually made the subnet not visible, so that we didn't have to deal with having to see the triangulated mesh while we're working on the other meshes. Okay, which is fair enough. We want to keep it hidden. Okay. So if we go back inside of our ROP export node, we can go ahead and actually turn that flag from as hidden null nodes to as hidden full nodes. Okay. That will ensure that when FBX exports, even the hidden nodes will actually get exported as a full node. Okay. So let's go back out. And then we're going to save the node type, or in the case of 14, save operator type, and this should actually update this node as well. And then we're going to right click on this and say match current definition. Okay. Very cool. After doing so, simply select our two nodes again and hit save FBX, which will update our FBX files. And even if we look at the file system, you will notice that now they're a little bit bigger in size. Okay. So let's go back in here and let's try to re-import them again. So let's import the small column and the tall column and hit open. And then say import all. And now they imported great. So now we can go ahead and instantiate it in our level. And you will notice that we have our two columns generated as expected. Very cool. You notice how quickly we were able to generate this column out of this column within just a few seconds, which is really awesome. Say, for example, I wanted to make this column a little bit different. I wanted to taper more, perhaps, and maybe I will want it to actually have, to actually have maybe like shallower grooves. We can always go back over here. And actually, I don't think I ever exposed a parameter, but let's do a few other things. So let's go ahead and actually pick our asset here and actually increase our taper to actually make them a little bit more taper. And I don't know, maybe we'll go ahead and actually put even less grooves. Okay, something like that. And then let's go ahead and actually adjust, let's see, I think maybe use a taper to make it a little bit thicker. So this is actually a much different looking column now. Okay, go ahead and hit export this one by hitting save FBX. Let's go back to Unreal, and all that you really have to do is to just right click on this on your node inside of the exporter in the content browser and hit re-import, and there is a new column. It's really nice because building these pipelines from Houdini makes it so that you can have a pretty direct line in between, just moving a few sliders on your digital asset and getting a full change asset inside of Houdini. Okay, so it's very cool, and I think this probably covers it for this particular video. Thank you for watching, and hopefully we'll see you for the next video.